Our podcast today features a brain injury survivor who was injured in a motor vehicle accident. Injuries sustained in motor vehicle related incidents are one of the leading causes of traumatic head injury, contributing to 45%, followed by falls, bicycle incidents, workplace injuries, sports, assaults, and other traumatic causes, medical conditions, asphyxia, poisoning, and other toxins. Since the brain is the control center for everything we do, feel, and think, brain injuries can result in many kinds of cognitive, physical, behavioral, and emotional impairments and interfere with the brain's ability to perform tasks. These impairments can be permanent or temporary. While each brain injury is a unique event with a unique set of effects, there are some common difficulties arising from brain injuries. These include physical, sensory, communication, emotional, and cognitive problems. Sensory issues, including impaired vision or hearing difficulties, will be elaborated on by Fred. The brain is composed of three parts: the brainstem, cerebellum, and cerebrum, which is divided into lobes: the frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal. The table lists the lobes of the brain and their normal functions, as well as problems that may occur when injured. You can pause the video here to read this chart or come back to it later on. Although an injury may occur in a specific area, it is important to understand that the brain functions as a whole by interrelating its component parts. Hello, everyone. Today we're here with Fred Dugdale, who is a traumatic brain injury survivor. Welcome, Fred. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. I've been involved with Manitoba Brain Injury Association for quite a few years, and it's always a pleasure to do what I can to raise awareness, and especially during Brain Injury Awareness Month, get people to understand a little bit more about something that is often, to a lot of people, an invisible injury. So I guess we're ready to go, and I'll be happy to share whatever I can.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and share your brain injury story and how it has affected your life?
Sure. Several years ago, I was involved in a motor vehicle accident. Got rear-ended, and I was in a right shoulder check when that happened. So instead of just going back against a headrest, I actually got wedged between the driver's seat and the passenger seat, which meant that I got quite a snap. My neck and head, were banged pretty good. And when I came out of all of that, we dealt with the obvious injuries, but it took a while to realize that some of the things that I used to be able to do, I wasn't able to do the same way, and that my vision and my hearing and my memory and a number of things were affected. So I trudged along trying to figure out how to make this all come together. Then when it just continued and I wasn't able to really figure out how to fix it, and neither were the basic medical people either, I went to Manitoba Brain Injury Association, where I was told a lot of things about brain and brain injury that I didn't know before. And I was referred to a doctor who was used to doing work with people, and he referred me to a neurologist, and that was life-changing. That's where I was informed about how a concussion could result in traumatic brain injury, and how after that you could have post-concussion syndrome, which is these effects just lasting a lot longer than a lot of people who are able to kind of come out of it, that their brain heals well enough. So that's kind of what happened. As far as how it affected me, as I mentioned, my vision, it affected my ability to focus. A lot of people think that everything happens with your eye. Well, your eye just picks up an image and sends it back into your brain. And something called the occipital lobe, which is just at the back of your head above the brainstem, that's where a lot of the vision processing goes on. And that's how you have your brain make sense of what your eye is picked up as an image.
Right.
Well, that wasn't working so well for me. Also, I had increased light sensitivity, way more than just, oh gosh, it's sunny out. If it was a freshly snow day and I was outside and I didn't have some really good sunglasses, I was basically snowblind. I really couldn't see where I was going. And so light sensitivity has caused me to wear sunglasses a lot more than I normally would. And I tend to have lower lighting in rooms because the glare is too much for me. When it came to my hearing, also I ended up with tinnitus. About 30% of my audible intake is kind of a high-pitched sound, almost like a microwave beep or the kind of beeps that you hear when vehicles are backing up. And that pitch is something that, it didn't change how I heard things around me. It just interfered with what I was trying to hear. And it took a lot of work to adjust to cope with it. My tinnitus didn't go away. I just got better at learning to listen around it. And it also disrupted my sleep tremendously in the early days too, where, if I didn't have some other sound going on in the room that was equal to or louder than the tinnitus, then it just about drove me crazy. So there were those things. And then there's the brain fog, the fact that a lot of times you just kind of get this very lightheadedness. And I often say that with my computer, it's a really good friend because it's got far more patience than most people I deal with. Mm-hmm. In that, if I get a bit of brain fog, it saves what's on my screen and waits for me to come back to it. So there's just things like that affect you.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that these symptoms that you had, did anything help them get better over time, or did you just become accustomed to them? Like, do you just live around them, or was there anything that helped, for example, your hearing or your vision?
Well, with what I ended up doing, first of all, I used to wear eyeglasses. They weren't a really strong prescription, but I basically stopped wearing them because they weren't helping. In fact, a lot of times they created more problems than they helped. Okay. What I did do is I bought more than one strength of reading glass. And when I'm having to read something, I will try different strengths to see if at that time, which one is going to help me the most. Okay. Sunglasses. I used to just buy sunglasses and say, okay, these are probably good enough. Yeah. Now I really try to find the absolute best sunglasses because they have to really filter that light. Otherwise, I get headaches. It's way too hard on me. And as far as the tinnitus goes, like I mentioned, I simply have to find a way to get used to it. Okay. And now I know it's there, and it's annoying, but it's not as bad as it was in the sense that I'm able to think around it, to think past it, to compensate for it. The only thing that I can't do is if the pitch of the tinnitus that's squealing in my head is the same as a pitch of something else around me. Like if I'm out on the street and a fire engine or a police car goes by and their sirens are going, I got to cover my ears. Like it just about flattens me. Okay. And the other thing is that I can't listen to some music I used to listen to because if the female vocalist has the same pitch as what the sound in my head is, and it is inside my head, it's an auditory part of your brain. It's not my ear that's the problem. Right. Just like it wasn't my eyes that are the problem so much as what my brain's doing. Right. And if the pitch is the same, then it just compounds the problem, and it actually hurts. And it's the same with I went to see a friend of mine's daughter-in-law is involved in music, and she was having a little CD release party and that. And I went to it, and they were using a synthesizer, a keyboard. Oh. And some of the notes that the synthesizer was producing as she was playing the melody,
Yeah.
they just killed me. And I basically said to my friend, I'm going to have to leave.
Oh,
Like I can't stay. I mean, the music is wonderful,
mhm.
but it's causing me too much distress.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what happens. And you work around as much as you can, and other stuff you just have to eliminate, or it's going to cause you difficulties.
Right. Okay. And do you feel like brain injuries are overlooked or stigmatized in our society?
Oh, for sure. I mean, in the early stages when I was trying to figure out what was going on, uh, a lot of people just didn't believe. I mean, they look at you and say, well, you don't look any different, and you seem functional.
Mhm.
And I say, but the biggest problem is that you would have to have known me for a fairly long period of time to know what I was like before the accident and
Right.
what I'm like now, and the things that I can't do that I used to be able to do. And the other problem with a lot of this stuff is that it's an invisible injury in many cases, unless you had external damage. Like if you were involved in an accident and your head hit the windshield,
Yeah.
and it cut you and you cracked your skull and all that. Yeah, for sure. If you just got your brain bounced around inside the skull and there's nothing that shows up externally,
Yeah.
it's a soft tissue injury. It doesn't show up in MRIs and CT scans unless there's a brain bleed or something like that. So nobody at the beginning is seeing you that differently, and they're not quite often willing to accept the fact that there is that damage. And the other problem that I faced is that when you went to get help,
Yeah.
you fell in between. If you were extremely injured, it was obvious, and help was there.
Yeah.
But if you're in that zone, like I would say, if I'm having brain fog, or if I'm having headaches, or some anxiety because I'm struggling with what I'm doing,
Right.
uh, people just don't get it. They don't see it, and so to them, it maybe isn't real.
Right.
And a couple of times I went to get some help, and I went to an organization, and they just said, well, you're too functional, like you're not damaged enough to
Right.
be in our program. Yep. You've got balance issues, you've got vision issues, you've got hearing issues, you've got memory issues, all these things, but
Yeah.
it's not bad enough. You don't fit anywhere. And that's where the programs at Manitoba Brain Injury are so valuable to the survivors and to the caregivers, to have a sense of community and understanding that just doesn't exist outside of that environment.
For sure. That must be very frustrating. How did you
Oh, for sure, it's frustrating.
Yeah, definitely. How did you stay motivated in your recovery, and what did you learn as a result of your brain injury?
Well, one of the first things I learned is that you've got to keep going. It's not unlike a physical injury. If you broke your leg, when it's finally able for you to get up and start moving, you better do it, or you're not going to bring it back to a good functional level. And the brain is somewhat the same, in that your wherever the damaged areas are, your brain is seeking to reestablish connections. And so sometimes it has to find a different way to accomplish what it did before. And that's where I use the analogy of anybody who's ever had vinyl records, and you get a scratch on those vinyl records. Sometimes a scratch is a surface scratch, you get a little clicky sound. Well, sometimes I have a little bit of disruption and I move past it. Other times it's like a deep scratch on an LP, and it skips to the next band, and you kind of go, whoa, like how did I get from this topic to that topic? It just it can kind of frustrate you to the point where you start beating up on yourself, until you realize that these are things you've just got to work with. You just got to calm down and sort of start back where you left off.
Right.
But what I often say to people is the accident wasn't the end of the road. It was just a detour. The detour has taken me a different direction than if I would have stayed on my career path, which pretty much ceased to exist when I had the injury because I could not continue with the work I used to do.
Right.
But it's brought me into other things, including volunteering a lot within the disability community for Manitoba Brain Injury Association and other organizations.
Right.
And it's also brought me in contact with people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. So it's just a different path. And I'm thankful for being able to do what I can still do. And I'm thankful for the new friendships I've made and the new directions I've gone. And that life can still be good in spite of a brain injury, but you have to invest in making that happen. You can't leave it up to other people. I mean, other people can help you, but you've also got to help yourself.
Right. That's very inspirational. And I think that's a very good outlook on life. And is there anything else you would like to say to brain injury survivors, something you want them to understand, or any final thoughts you have?
Well, I think the big thing is that initially you're not going to understand what's going on. You're going to know that something's not right, but you're not going to understand. And where I made probably some of my biggest mistakes, and those around me, didn't catch on, is that I tried to just kind of work through it. Uh, I didn't know who to go to. I didn't know how to find out whether this was going to be a long-term effect. And so people who suspect that they might have had a concussion or a brain injury, better to get it checked out than to take a risk, because mine waited too long before I actually got some help. And the period of time that might have been more beneficial to have dealt with it
Mhm.
passed by. And so my recovery was slower. Um, I remember reading a story the other day about a fellow who said that he was suffering for a while with some bad heartburn. And
Okay.
when he went to the hospital, they said, "It's not heartburn, sir. You've had a heart attack." So
Oh,
just like that situation, don't make assumptions that you're okay. It's safer to get checked out than it is to kind of just limp along and think that it may get better. It would be better to go and find out from somebody that this isn't a problem than for you to leave it and find out later on it is a problem.
right. Thank you so much, Fred, for joining us and sharing your story and wisdom. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'll always be there for brain injury because Brain Injury Association was always there for me. Thank you.
Thank you.